Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. We're Stealth, and we're looking forward to kicking off this session with you. Concealment Uncovered. My name is Sean McClernand. I'm the CEO of STEALTH Concealment Solutions. A couple of housekeeping issues off to your right there. If you have not used GoToWebinar before, there's a little section where you can write questions to me. And I'd ask you to please feel free to use that as we go through the presentation. And I'll either read them as they come up, or I can read them at the end. Whatever works best for you, depending on the question. If it makes more sense to add it, I'll answer it at that time. Then I'll answer it. You'll also see it. There's some handouts, excuse me, to the that can be downloaded. Most notably, the PDF of this presentation for your use wherever you'd like to deploy it. So isn't that a beautiful picture of a concealment right there on top? Let's go ahead and get started. The agenda today, let's talk a little about the current state, then what makes a good concealment, popular types of concealment, key trends in concealment, some before and after pics, and then a little Q&A, hopefully, if you guys have some interest in the topics we've been discussing. The current state. So let's talk about the current state a little bit. The current state of concealment and in wireless is a bit in flux, right? I mean, we're all experiencing a bit of strangeness, especially as it goes on, as it regards the small cell business. A lot of headlines, a lot of requests by carriers and others for real estate within the city. How are they going to deploy it? Are they going to use light poles? Are they going to attach things to buildings? Are they going to go to wooden utility poles? Are they going to put new poles in? The questions just swirl and swirl around, and some of the providers have actually, decided to circumvent the normal procedures and gone rogue in certain parts of the country, only to be stopped at a later point. And that is a challenge, I'm sure, for municipalities as well as competitors of those folks, because it can set an awfully bad tone for the rest of the industry, as if we're trying to shove something down somebody else's throat, which is really never the case with the true professionals. The other current state item is the technology is a bit undefined. 5G is yes, it's out there, but they're saying it may be as long as 2020 before we really see something meaningful, and we've got to keep that in mind. The stakeholders are many. There's cities, there's utilities, there's the carriers themselves. There's the folks that are going to build these things that allow the antennas to go inside. All of that, that's a lot of people to coordinate and get on the same page. And nobody wants to be wrong. So in addition to all these questions swirling around, it becomes difficult to pick a winner, because there's also a flood of new entrants into this, because whenever there's new opportunity, there's always new entrants. So that is going on all the time now during the concealment business and the wireless business as a whole, and that's a challenge to manage. So one of the things we wanted to do and provide a little relief in that decision-making process is to discuss and uncover some of the different options we have for meeting those needs. And you can see in these pictures here, there's really no limit to where we can go. One's at an airport, one's at a church, the other's in downtown Charleston. And the steeple and the box on top of the parking garage, and then those little pods off to the right. So, it doesn't really, we're not constrained by anything really. A couple of more pictures here as we talk about what we're going to look at. You have the middle picture there shows you like a tri-use concealment. It's used for advertising. It pays rent to whoever the landowner is, and it gives everybody service. So that's the classic win-win-win strategy that we're all trying to get in with. And I think you'll find what concealment is extremely effective at doing is bringing parties together to create a solution where a solution might not have otherwise existed. And the benefit is usually to all parties, because as I said, the landowner gets some rent, the people driving by get coverage, and the carrier gets what they what they want too, which is revenue from their users. And so they're constantly scanning the landscape, as you can see, for a variety of different places to drop those concealments into place. So what makes a good city together? A good concealment, excuse me. As I mentioned, it brings cities and carriers, and I use those two terms very broadly, to achieve low visual impact coverage. And what do I mean by that? Well, we've all driven by, we drive down 95 frequently here to Florida and whatnot. You'll see all those large towers along the highway. It definitely, those are considered an eyesore really by today's standards. But it really, concealment when done properly, it brings people together in order to achieve that low visual impact, low visual pollution, however you want to characterize it. It also will draw little to no attention, or maybe even adds to the look of the building. Most notably, if you look at the center picture down below, we were able to create that entire concealment on top of the original roof and mimic all the original architectural designs per the landlord's request. Now, that's an over-the-top challenge for us. Not every landowner or landlord requires that level of detail on his concealments, but when it's necessary and when it's the only way the site is going to get built, that makes a good concealment, because we're allowed to then bridge the gap between the needs of the vendor and the needs of the landlord and the needs of the carrier. The other thing we want to do is make sure it lasts a long time. That's a good concealment. We have sites that are in the field for over 20 years. Some of them look better than others because of the way they get maintained, but we build everything when we're building it to last. And then lastly, this is kind of a subset of point 2, it matches. It matches whatever it's going to go up against or next to the satisfaction of all the parties involved. So those are just some of the key points that make a good concealment. For instance, you look at these two pictures and you can see these two items wouldn't draw a lot of attention. It's not some big eyesore or some big monstrosity that has to be attached to the building in order to make it work. In this instance, on the left, there were other chimneys on the buildings in the area, but not on this one. We just mimicked it, and we created a simple, low-cost solution to hide that antenna. Everybody was happy because, let's face it, they didn't want a pole with antennas sticking up on the top of that building. Over there on the right, on that older building, you can see these side-mounted boxes. Yeah, they jut out a little bit, but they match, and so they draw little or no attention. That a good concealment disappears after a while. Initially everybody might notice it because it's new, but the best ones disappear. Here's another for instance. We're bringing the stakeholders together to create the visually appealing solutions. In this case, all the way on the right, you had a guy that owned a bunch of storage facilities who already had American flag theme and wanted to know if something could be done to build off that, if he was going to allow antennas to be on the site. And so we came up with that. In Vegas, at the Fashion Show Mall, they wanted the coverage, but they wanted it to be concealed. So we played off of existing logos and messages there to create a concealed environment for them. And then all the way on the left-hand side, you have someone who is taking advantage of what they think is the coming demand for wireless. And this church actually had this concealment built above the bell there in order to create opportunity for themselves to at some point be in a position to say, hey, Mr. Carrier, Mrs. Carrier, you can put this up here and we have space for you. And all of those were considered by the end users to be visually appealing and what they wanted. And it brought people together in order to get something done, again, that might not otherwise have been done. So that's what makes a good concealment, but what are some of the popular types of concealments? Well, there's really 3 buckets, and there's a myriad of double clicks underneath all of these, but poles, rooftops, and towers. So let's talk a little bit about each one. Poles, types of concealments, popular types of concealment, poles and trees. They're easily explained and visualized. What do I mean by that? If I'm walking into a town council and I say we want to put up a tree, there's not a whole lot of argument on what a tree is. Pine tree is a pine tree. Okay, it's going to be taller than most pine trees. People get that. But it's not hard for people to conceptualize. If I say I want to build a 19th century cupola extension, people, they need a lot more explanation. So that's nice about the trees and the poles. And if I say a flagpole, everybody knows what a flagpole looks like. They're cheaper than some solutions in the short run, for sure. Trees can be very expensive in the long run because, let's face it, those branches are entirely exposed to the weather 365, 24 hours a day, and they just deteriorate over time. They're all UV tested, and the best materials are used by all the manufacturers that I'm aware of, but they eventually will succumb to time much more so than some of the panelized jobs that we do. Flagpoles too also can they experience a lot of wind, a lot of rain, a lot of vibration back and forth. So they can sometimes require more maintenance as well. They're fast to install, as I just said, they can require maintenance. So it's important to keep that in mind when choosing those. And they're not very flexible for expansion either. Truth be told, they can be built to have some inherent expansion, but nothing like putting a screen wall on a rooftop, which we'll talk about. Another popular type is the towers, becoming increasing popular. As you can see from these pictures, just different shapes, sizes, whatever is needed by that particular end user can typically be created. They're excellent for multi-carrier locations. Obviously, those are large structures. You can put a lot of things inside of them. You can upgrade equipment simply, easily, and in some cases without any exposure to the elements, which again makes them attractive. A tree requires a man basket. You have to go up in the air, and most of the installers I've talked with would rather work inside, say, that clock tower over there up in the third picture from the right than they would outside in January on a tree. So there's also a high rate of approval for these design-sensitive concealment projects because they're so customized. Now that means they come with a price, of course, but usually that price is worth it to the end users because the value of the revenue exceeds, over time what the initial cost for the concealment is. So these are just two options: flagpoles, trees, and towers, that can provide an excellent opportunity to bring the stakeholders together, like we discussed, and make something happen where otherwise it might not have happened. I mean, if you look again at that third picture with the clock tower, there was no way you were putting a traditional tower up there. That's a high-end shopping center. It needed to be something that was in line with the aesthetic that was there. And so we created, with working with the other players, we created that solution for them. The final bucket are the rooftop concealments. They're excellent choices for historic preservation because putting those buildings are typically in very useful parts of the town, very central parts of the town. So putting a concealment on there is good, and it's a great way. The panel can be manipulated both in surface texture and also shape to mimic a bunch of different shapes and sizes. Rooftop and building additions tend to disappear quickly from the mental minds of the people walking in and out of the building, or even looking over on adjacent buildings. They just kind of fade away. And you can see that in some of the pictures, the middle picture especially. We've used some side-mounted boxes there. If you see my cursor, you can see there's a box there that does a really good job of hiding itself. They're easy to access. Somebody just takes the elevator to the top of the building and they're in, and they walk up there and they adjust whatever needs to be adjusted. And you can go from some very expensive solutions in this environment as well to the more simple solutions, like on the right-hand side, which is just, it's almost like a white picket fence, except it's not made of wood, because wood would not allow us to transmit or would not allow the signal to transmit through, because wood holds water, and water is a big foe for radio frequency signal to get to your phone. So the material we use does not impede that, whether it's wet or not. So, and you can see the boxes over here that kind of blend in carefully with the existing lines of the building. But I bet you only a few of you saw this one over here, which is also hidden away. So they really do disappear if they're done well. which we try to do, and they're designed, you know, and thoughtfully engineered, you can make them disappear quickly. And you know, that's good. The sooner those things just do what they're supposed to do, which is just hide the thing so the antennas can work, the better it's off for, better off everyone is. Here's some more pictures. We love our rooftops. There's a hotel at the Embassy Suites there where we mimic some of their architectural elements, and we went up with that on the right hand side there and put the antennas in there. Again, completely disappears just from your attention. There's nothing jarring about that. Little equipment screen, faux equipment screen wall, louvered screen wall. Again, simple, easy to do. The Embassy Suites one, of course, they have a different standard, and they wanted all the molding and everything on there, so that made it a little bit more expensive. But you know, expense is in the control of the buyer to some extent, not necessarily all controlled by the concealment company. It depends on what you're bringing to the table. The more lead time we have and the more understanding we have of what you're trying to accomplish, the better we can be and the more competitive we can be as we price these things too. Then the right hand side, this is simple radius panel water tower. Our panels are made in such a way that you can heat them up and bend them into radius structures and shapes, and again mimic things that were there originally, or build off themes that the town has, whatever the case may be. Here's a little progression of a rooftop. You know, you go from nothing. That's what it looked like before. Now imagine every one of those orange posts was an antenna, because that's pretty much where they were going. And then the unit is completely built beforehand, sent to them. That's not always the case. It depends on the size and whether or not it can fit on a truck and how far it's traveling. And then finally, when you walk away, it's on top, and it looks like some sort of equipment screen wall for air conditioning or air handlers or whatever. And they chose to mimic the little dormer there underneath it with the color. So I think it blends nicely, and again achieves the key goals of bringing the people together to get the job done, but also disappearing quickly. You know, and again, simple, easy to get at. Doesn't have a roof on it, so you're not totally shielded from the elements if you're going up there to work on it. But it is easier to work on than some other concealments. I hinted a little bit about maintenance a few slides ago. You know, maintaining an existing site is as important as installing a new one. It really is. And maintenance sometimes gets short shrift in the industry because of we're moving so fast. But thankfully, the carriers put strong quality controls on us, and we put them on ourselves in order to make sure we're building what we build lasts. I mean, we wouldn't have been around for 25 years if that wasn't the case. But we still recommend the checkups are done every 6 months at least. If you're living in a Four Seasons type of environment, maybe even more, you know, because storm seasons can wreak havoc on these concealments, especially if they were maybe not installed per spec, or maybe a bolt got left out, or you know, something that would weaken the overall structure that the wind or the weather might take advantage of. So if you're going to go visit a site, you should be prepared. Take drawings, touch up paint, extra bolts, and if it's one of our sites, we can help you prepare that little kit before you go out, and we're more than willing to do so. As you can see on the right-hand side there, somebody's given that concealment a fresh coat of paint, which is always a good idea too. You know, the paint will probably fade and disappear a lot sooner than the actual material will ever fail, provided everything's installed properly. Because one thing about making things that look like their real counterparts is that people tend to expect them to be as maintenance-free and last as long as their real counterparts, meaning that fake brick wall on the left there, eventually people come to accept the fact that it's a brick wall, but then they don't understand why it's, you know, it requires a lot more maintenance as compared to not a lot of maintenance, but a lot more maintenance than a real brick wall. So let's talk about the key trends, the small cell smoke, as I call it. There's a lot of smoke, a lot of discussion about where, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, where the poles going to go? How are they going to be poles? Are they going to be boxes? Who's going to pay for it? When are they going to pay for it? How fast will the deployment be? Does the new company providing this material, do they know how to do it? Does the old company, are they up to the task? You know, there's so many questions swirling around, and the cities are resisting mightily in some instances. In other instances, they're welcoming it with open arms. So there's a lot of inconsistency across the board. So I think it's going to require a lot of patience on the part of all involved, and I think it's going to require some thoughtfulness to sit down and design solutions that will last a long time, because this isn't like a brick chimney going on a rooftop. This is going to be part of the cityscape in a most obvious way, as that pole in Pittsburgh on the left-hand side. That's going to be there at ground level where everybody can see it for a long time. This disappearing, in one sense, is not going to happen. If it's 4 stories in the air or 8 stories in the air, yes, it really will have very little impact on the individual going forward, the individual community going forward, provided it stays in one piece. But the light poles are different. You know, you have a lot of things going on that pole on the left. You got a banner, so you're doing some advertising. That means people are touching it and going up and messing with it at least a couple of times a year, seasonally maybe. Then you've got a light, the LED light. Granted, they're low maintenance, but still, they fail and they need upkeep. And then you have the antenna equipment itself. And that's today's technology. So you know it's going to get touched and upgraded too. So there's a lot of demand being put on that pole that is not traditional demand of a light pole that was just a single function item before. A key trend in small cell, don't settle for concepts, ask for addresses. What do I mean by that? Well, you'll see you see a lot of Photoshop when you hear people talking about small cell. You see a lot of Photoshop on websites and brochures and stuff. You know, Stealth's done over 100 of these installed all across the United States. So we prefer to send real pictures of what we've done and not what we've done, and not just rely on photo sims. In fact, if we have a picture, we'll always send that instead of a photo sim to see if that'll satisfy it. And even better than that is take a field trip. Go check it out. Another key trend is they're building concealment into their ordinances. We have an example here of an ordinance for Nashville, I believe it is. Yeah, and but there's also Charleston has its own right now. So we're you know, even in our own backyard, which, you know, 5 years ago that never would have been the case, but it's building. So that just means it's something you have to keep in mind. So are you likely to get better, faster approval if you consider that early rather than going the unconcealed route first and trying to see if you can avoid the extra expense of concealment, which is usually offset by the expense of fighting the city, and that is again, we're about trying to create the bridge between the two sets of people that may have competing end goals, and try to come up with a structure that will allow everybody to meet their goals and their vision of what should be in their city. And understandably, there's a lot of ownership on all sides, and people want certain things for their towns and their cities, and they want it done a certain way. So we want to be as sensitive to that as humanly possible. You can see it's happening it actually is happening in Alaska. They vary from city to city, as you can see here. Some cities even, you know, fast track you if you're willing to acknowledge the fact that you're going to use concealment ahead of time. So that may be an advantage to you. If it's available and you think you're going to be concealing, find out, you know, use it, because a lot of these sites take a lot longer than 30 or 90 days to kick off. I'm sure I don't have to tell a lot of people on this call that fact. Other key trend is, you know, municipalities are purchasing concealment. Eagan, Minnesota here did a concealment recently. We did it with them, and they went all out. They put lights on it, so it's all LED controlled, and they'll be able to use that as a source of revenue, as well as they can rent out the colors and the use of programming on the tower to highlight different organizations, highlight different seasons, whatever it is that they want to do. They really made it a central piece of their city. which is, kind of cool. You can, if you Google Egan Sperry, you'll see other interesting treatments of that site as well. Kind of there's a time elapse one that lasts a little bit longer than we have time for here. So here's a little before and after. I just want to make sure I didn't skip a slide there that I promised at the top of the presentation. Again, this is, you're taking a building that they were very proud of on this church, not church, at this university, and they wanted the coverage. They absolutely wanted the coverage. They needed the coverage. I mean, to get students to come to the school these days, you need coverage. But they didn't want to just slap antennas either on the outside of that lower brick structure on the left, or even with some sort of antenna mounts on the top. So they asked and wondered if we could replicate what was going on at the bottom with another section going up top, and we could, and we did, and it looked great. And in the end, again, we got some work, the carrier gets some revenue, and the school gets some rent. So all that again is a win-win-win. And not every site requires this by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm really trying to talk to you about is the different kinds of options, different potential we have for doing concealments, and the ideas that you can come up with when you're thinking about this. So, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of angst, and some of it surrounds concealment, when to do it, how to do it. But we have boiled down what we think is the anatomy of the successful concealment project. So here's kind of a solution, and you can lay this across any project that you want to do for concealment, and any competitor's method. We prefer you use ours, but we understand. So first and foremost, you want to have a good site assessment. You want to make sure you're looking at all the possibilities, and if the cost is a concern, which it always is, involve your concealment company early, because they can direct you probably to the more lower cost solutions, but still effective. The design process, here we're going to talk about aesthetic elements, mock-ups, renderings. We're going to provide you with a whole slew of things to make a decision on and to understand what's going to happen. There's an overemphasis here, we believe, in the industry on photosims. Photosims, if that's the only item you're using to convince someone, it usually ends up in tears, because the photosim never really does justice to what eventually gets installed. As I mentioned earlier, we recommend going on a field trip, and most towns now, all the large cities, metropolitan areas, have dozens of concealments within them, and we should feel free to, you should feel free to ask to go see them. Our distributors, our rep network takes people all the time around their territories to get people initiated on what a real concealment looks like. And in some cases, you go up and touch it, you can see it, and understand really what it's made of and what the impact might be in your town. The more you're going to spend, like for Egan Sperry, they went around and they looked at a bunch of different things because they were going to make a big investment. Next, you want to have an engineering plan. How will it all work? Do the people who are engineering this know what they're doing? Have they done this before? Do they understand what's required? Because again, these are non-traditional building materials. So they'll look like traditional building materials, but they will not act like traditional building materials. So they have to be supported in certain ways, and they have to be made of certain things in order to last as long as you want, which leads me to my next point. Material selection. You got to have a best of breed materials. Once you have that engineering plan locked out and you've agreed on the design, you really want to try to pull together the best materials you can to not only look great, but to have the best RF you possibly can deliver as well. Each project in our house has a project manager with many years of experience and hundreds of, if not 1,000 in some cases, thousands of projects experience, which allows you to have the best opportunity for success. Fabrication, the raw materials, you want to have people that know what they're doing, how to handle these raw materials, how to manipulate non-traditional building materials to the greatest advantage for the buyer. Package and shipping is never as simple as it sounds. You want to make sure the roads are closed. You want to make sure, if necessary, you want to make sure that the permits are there. You want to make sure the trucks arrive in the right order. Is there space to lay it down? It's again, if you've been through it, you know what to do. If you don't, it can be challenging. And then site installation, we want to make it easy as we can for everybody to get things done. I want to be sensitive to time here. And we've got some wireless industry resources I wanted to tell you about too. Inside Towers is a great daily kind of headline news aggregator. AGL has been a fantastic resource for the industry as a whole, but also been very supportive and in the education of the market regarding concealment. So they have good stuff in there. One of our favorite things is the State Wireless Association programs. That is a great way to get to meet people who are in the business, understand the business, and that are very close to the action. So if there's anybody in this call from a municipality or city, if you're not involved in the State Wireless Association program, by all means, they'd welcome your involvement, and you'd probably learn a little bit too about what's possible. So let's see what I got one more slide here, I think. Yeah, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We're really building our Instagram presence, a lot of pictures there. And then of course we have a great gallery on Flickr that you should go take a look at if you have the opportunity, where we put everything into categories and make it very easy for you to sort and review, and those pictures are downloadable, and you can use them to persuade or provoke, however you want to use them. So I see some questions here, which is great. Let's see. I noticed there's one here that says, let me see. I noticed many of the cities you referenced were cityscapes consults. So that's yeah, that we've worked closely with organizations like Cityscapes over the years, and that's been good for us. I think it's a good organization. Somebody asked you, we have material for all frequencies. Any frequency that we've been asked to conceal, we've been able to do that. Typically people give us a frequency, and then we provide the testing that we've already done on our material to prove that it does indeed work in the best possible manner. Is our material approved by all the major carriers? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And these concealments can work in any environment, any height, any kind of about any kind of antenna. You know, sometimes there's some misinformation about concealment only works at 100 feet and below. Those kinds of things are not true, or that trees and poles are the only things that are available. That isn't, obviously, as going through this presentation, I hope demonstrated, there are lots of other choices that you can have for that too. And then one of the biggest misconception of concealment, that's a great question. One of the biggest misconception is that it's expensive and can take a long time. It's typically expensive and takes longer than you like, because it's usually ordered last, and that whenever you order something last but or late, and you need it right away, it tends to cost you more money. Sometimes it doesn't come as fast as you like either, because you can't just conjure up some of these custom shapes by going into Home Depot and buying them off the shelf. The more customized it is, the more time it's going to take, and that's important for everybody, because we want it to last, you know, a really, really long time. Are there any other questions? So I tried to stick close to our 30 minutes. I really appreciate everybody taking the time to attend the call today, and I hope you have a wonderful 4th of July. Don't forget, you can get a copy of the handouts to your right there in your little bar. And if you need anything else, you can definitely contact us. Caitlin Nardi, you can see her name at the bottom there, and her extension. She can get you anything you require regarding SIMS samples, etc. So make sure you avail yourself of that if you need it. And again, have a great 4th of July, and thank you for spending some time with us today.